In its golden age, Alexandria rose from the Mediterranean like a promise, a city where the world's brightest minds gathered to test the limits of knowledge. Here, ideas traveled faster than armies, carried by scholars who believed understanding itself could reshape civilization. Lanterns glowed along marble corridors, and voices echoed in dozens of languages, all converging toward the same pursuit: truth. Yet beneath this brilliance lingered an eerie contradiction. How could a place so devoted to preserving human thought become the site of history's greatest intellectual disappearance? That paradox haunts Alexandria's legacy, forcing us to wonder whether knowledge can ever be truly safe, even in a city built to protect it. Its brilliance endures, whispering of treasures lost and questions time refused to answer forever. Long before the Library of Alexandria became a symbol of total ruin, the first flames flickered under circumstances no one can fully reconstruct. Ancient sources blame different culprits. Some point to careless soldiers, others to strategic fires meant to block an advancing enemy, while a few insist the blaze was far smaller than later legends suggest. The contradictions are unsettling, hinting that the library may not have suffered one clean catastrophe, but several scattered blows over centuries. Each account feels like a fragment of a larger truth that refuses to surface, and it raises a chilling possibility. What if the destruction we imagine as a single tragic moment was actually a slow, repeated unraveling no historian can neatly explain? Its timeline dissolves into silence and doubt. The accounts left behind by ancient writers clash so dramatically that they seem to describe different worlds entirely. Some claim the library collapsed in a single catastrophic moment. Others insist it lingered for generations, wounded but alive. A few describe only minimal damage, while later historians speak of total annihilation. These voices, separated by centuries, weave a fog so dense that no fixed timeline can survive inside it. And in that uncertainty, speculation thrives. If no one agrees on what was destroyed or when, then what prevents the possibility that large portions of the collection were quietly moved, hidden, or claimed by unseen hands? The contradictions feel less like errors and more like clues, pointing toward events deliberately obscured from history. Long before the library faced its darkest hours, scholars understood the fragility of their work and quietly circulated copies of prized scrolls beyond the main halls. Some texts traveled with visiting academics, others were stored in satellite archives, and a few were rumored to have been removed in anticipation of unrest. This possibility creates a tension that history has never resolved. If thousands of scrolls slipped away before the flames, then the library's true legacy may not have perished at all. Instead, it may have scattered across the ancient world, hidden in private collections, royal troves, or forgotten storerooms. The haunting question lingers in every gap of the record. If the scrolls survived, where have they been waiting all this time, and why has no one found them? Alexandria's legendary library was never a single building, but a sprawling constellation of knowledge scattered across the city. At its heart stood the Museon, but beyond it lay the Serapeum, with its sacred chambers and the royal archives guarded by dynasties who understood the power of information. Each facility housed its own collections, some public, some accessible only to favored scholars. This network complicates every story of destruction because it suggests no single disaster could erase everything. The true library was a living organism with many vital organs, some hidden deep within the city, and that raises an unsettling possibility. If knowledge was spread so widely, then large portions of it could have survived unnoticed, preserved where no fire ever reached. Managing hundreds of thousands of scrolls required a fluid system that blurred the line between preservation and circulation. Scholars routinely borrowed texts for study, while scribes moved between buildings with armfuls of papyri destined for copying rooms or storage vaults. This constant movement meant the library's collection was rarely stationary. At any moment, countless scrolls were outside the main halls, shipped to satellite archives, carried aboard merchant vessels for duplication, or temporarily stored in private residences near the academic quarter. Such mobility challenges every later claim of total destruction. If the collection lived in motion, then no fire, riot, or conquest could have consumed everything at once. Somewhere along these routes, some of the most precious works might have quietly slipped beyond history's reach. Alexandria's rulers enforced a bold policy that turned the city into a magnet for intellectual treasure. Any ship entering the harbor was required to surrender its manuscripts for copying, with originals sometimes kept in the royal archives, while pristine replicas were returned to their owners. Over decades, this practice accumulated a vast parallel library, an unofficial trove of texts seized from every corner of the known world. Many of these captured works may never have been cataloged properly, making their movements nearly impossible to trace. And if even a fraction of this shadow archive survived in storerooms or private hands, it would mean the library's final fate was far more complex than a simple tale of flames, reducing everything to ash. The great thinkers of Alexandria often copied beloved works for personal use, creating private libraries that reflected their research obsessions and philosophical battles. These collections were sometimes as large as small archives, stored in townhouses, rented chambers, and rooms attached to temples. When political unrest erupted, scholars protected their own manuscripts first, carrying them away or sealing them behind walls. Some fled the city entirely, bringing their texts to distant lands where later generations forgot their origins. These personal collections represent countless opportunities for survival that official histories rarely acknowledge. If even a few of these scholars preserved their scrolls through Alexandria's turbulent centuries, then pieces of the library may still lie hidden within forgotten troves, scattered far from the city that once nurtured them. When Julius Caesar found himself cornered in Alexandria during a chaotic civil war, he ordered ships in the harbor to be set ablaze to block enemy forces. The fire spread unexpectedly, reaching warehouses said to store papyrus and valuable manuscripts. Ancient writers disagree on how far the flames reached, but Caesar's own brief acknowledgment suggests more damage occurred than Rome later admitted. The ambiguity invites suspicion. If destruction was greater than recorded, Rome may have chosen silence to avoid blame. Yet if destruction was smaller, then tales of catastrophic loss might have masked something else entirely, perhaps the selective removal of prized texts. The siege remains a moment wrapped in contradictions, where fire and secrecy work together to obscure the truth. The Romans revered Greek scholarship, collecting its literature, philosophy, and science with almost obsessive devotion. Wealthy Roman patrons competed to own the finest libraries, and emperors themselves sponsored massive acquisitions of Greek texts. This cultural hunger makes it difficult to believe that Rome would casually allow the destruction of Alexandria's greatest treasures. Instead, it raises a more provocative question. Did Roman officials quietly appropriate key works under the guise of political oversight or protection? If so, the library's disappearance becomes less a story of careless ruin and more one of strategic absorption. Rome, after all, had both the motivation and the means to claim the finest scrolls, ensuring their survival while leaving Alexandria to bear the burden of historical blame. Historical fragments hint that after the turmoil surrounding Caesar's presence in Egypt, a selection of Alexandrian scrolls was shipped to Rome as compensation or as scholarly gifts. These mentions are brief, vague, and tantalizingly incomplete, offering no list of titles or quantity transferred. The Imperial Library in Rome grew rapidly during this period, its sudden expansions suspiciously aligned with Alexandria's misfortunes. Some scholars believe these transfers were far more substantial than acknowledged, potentially including rare works that vanished from Egyptian records entirely. Without inventories, the truth remains hidden behind bureaucratic silence. If Rome absorbed parts of the library, then the disappearance of many scrolls may trace not to fire but to relocation, knowledge preserved, yet separated forever from its birthplace. In an age famous for meticulous record keeping, the absence of detailed inventories from Alexandria and Rome is one of the most unsettling clues of all. Yeah, documents that should track transferred manuscripts simply do not exist or survive only as damaged fragments offering little insight. Historians debate whether these gaps reflect accidental loss, deliberate destruction, or administrative chaos. Yet the pattern is too consistent to dismiss entirely. Each missing inventory erases another step in the trail, making it nearly impossible to reconstruct which scrolls remained in Egypt, which traveled to Rome, and which disappeared into private collections. This silence suggests forces at work that either neglected or concealed the movement of priceless knowledge. And within those missing pages, the fate of the library quietly evaporates. As Christianity spread through Alexandria, the meaning of knowledge itself began to shift. Works once cherished for their brilliance now carried the weight of pagan associations, attracting suspicion from rising religious authorities who feared the influence of old philosophies. Manuscripts filled with myths, mathematical theories, and cosmological speculation became symbols of a worldview the new order sought to replace. This tension created an atmosphere where preserving certain scrolls felt dangerous, even subversive. And in that climate, texts could quietly disappear under the veil of moral necessity. The city that once celebrated every idea now questioned which ideas deserved to survive, leaving scholars torn between loyalty to truth and fear of the forces reshaping their world. Hypatia's final days reflect the moment when Alexandria's dedication to open inquiry buckled under the weight of religious conflict. Revered as a brilliant philosopher and mathematician, she stood at the crossroads of two eras, defending reason as the city around her grew increasingly hostile to intellectual independence. Her murder by a mob was not only an attack on a person, but on the very spirit of scholarship the library had embodied. Yet rumors persisted that, sensing danger, she safeguarded key texts by copying or distributing them among allies. If true, fragments of her protected works may survive far beyond the tragedy that claimed her life, hidden by those who understood what she was trying to preserve. When the Serapeum fell, chroniclers described a devastating blow to Alexandria's remaining intellectual heart. Yet their accounts also hint that much of its collection had been quietly removed beforehand, spirited away to avoid the wrath of those who viewed the temple as a symbol of pagan defiance. The Serapeum was more than a religious sanctuary. It functioned as a secondary library that held crucial manuscripts once belonging to the great Maushan. Its destruction marks a turning point, but the uncertainty surrounding what was actually inside its halls that day deepens the mystery. If scrolls were taken elsewhere for safekeeping, their disappearance becomes not a tale of burning, but one of silent relocation. Some early Christian writers spoke in passing of sealed chambers beneath the Serapeum, rooms supposedly filled with scrolls locked away during times of unrest. No excavations have ever confirmed these spaces, yet the consistency of the references makes them difficult to dismiss. If these chambers existed, who sealed them, and what judgment determined what should remain hidden? The absence of physical evidence only fuels speculation that the rooms were looted long ago, or worse, remain undiscovered beneath layers of modern construction. The idea that untouched manuscripts might still lie in darkness under Alexandria is both thrilling and unnerving, suggesting the library's final chapters may not be fully written. Centuries after Alexandria's decline, a dramatic story emerged claiming that Caliph Umar ordered the remaining scrolls burned because of their knowledge either contradicted or duplicated Holy Scripture. Modern scholars doubt this tale, pointing out inconsistencies in chronology and motive, yet its persistence reveals how desperate later generations were to explain the library's disappearance. If the account is fabricated, then it may have been created to conceal a different event entirely, something more complex than a simple command to burn books. And if it contains even a grain of truth, it suggests that surviving scrolls still existed long after most believed the library destroyed, raising questions about who held them and why no trace remains today. One medieval claim insists that Alexandrian scrolls were used as fuel to heat bathhouses for 6 months, a detail so excessive it borders on the absurd. Yet the story persists, hinting that a large forgotten cache of manuscripts may have been discovered suddenly, too late for proper preservation. Its implausibility becomes its own mystery. If it is exaggeration, what real event does it distort? If it is truth, what warehouse or archive supplied such a quantity of scrolls centuries after the library supposedly vanished? The tale invites the unsettling idea that fragments of the collection resurfaced in pockets no historian expected, only to be destroyed out of convenience rather than malice. Arabic scholars became custodians of a vast intellectual inheritance, translating Greek works that might otherwise have vanished from memory. Yet many translations reference older sources we no longer possess, materials that seem to emerge from nowhere and disappear just as quietly. These ghostly citations raise an intriguing possibility. Some Alexandrian texts may have survived only long enough to be translated before their originals were lost. The echoes of these missing works linger in footnotes, introductions, and passing remarks, suggesting that the transmission of knowledge was far more fragile and far more mysterious than history typically admits. What was preserved and what was allowed to fade may not have been accidental. As political tides shifted across the Mediterranean, scholars fled Alexandria, carrying precious manuscripts to safer lands. Some joined intellectual circles in Persia, Syria, or Mesopotamia, where their knowledge blended into vibrant new traditions. A few early Islamic libraries contain works that do not match any surviving Greek originals, hinting at texts transported quietly by individuals seeking refuge. These migrations complicate the idea that Alexandria's knowledge simply vanished. Instead, portions of it may have traveled across continents, embedded in private collections, or integrated into new scholarly lineages. The faint traces of Alexandrian thought that appear in unexpected regions suggest that the library's legacy may have been scattered, not erased. The ancient world once possessed sweeping histories of cultures whose voices have since fallen silent. Writers like Berossus, Hecataeus, and Manetho recorded origin stories, king lists, and cosmologies that shaped early understandings of humanity's past. Many of these works were said to be preserved in Alexandria's vast collections, referenced repeatedly by later scholars who relied on them as authoritative sources. Yet not a single complete copy survives today. Their disappearance feels too complete, too absolute, as if someone methodically removed entire narratives from the historical record. The absence of these foundational texts suggests either catastrophic loss or deliberate control over which versions of history would endure. And in that void, speculation grows around what truths, political, scientific, or mythic, were allowed to vanish without explanation. Whispers from antiquity speak of inventions and theories that appear centuries ahead of their time, works rumored to have rested on Alexandria's shelves before slipping into oblivion. Some writers hinted at early steam devices, complex astronomical calculations, and world maps depicting lands unknown to classical explorers. If even a fraction of these claims were Chartesian or true, the library may have safeguarded knowledge that threatened established power structures or challenged accepted worldviews. Such texts would have been both priceless and dangerous, coveted by rulers and targeted by zealots. Their disappearance fuels the idea that Alexandria's destruction was not merely accidental, but perhaps also opportunistic, erasing ideas that society was not prepared to understand. What remained acceptable survived. What felt too advanced dissolved into legend. Scattered across the writings of ancient thinkers are small, easily overlooked remarks, suggesting that important works were duplicated and dispatched to undisclosed locations for protection. These lines seem casual, almost offhand, yet they open unsettling questions about where those copies were sent and who guarded them. If authors anticipated turmoil or feared censorship, they may have created survival chains that bypassed Alexandria entirely. But none of these secondary repositories have ever been identified, and the trail ends abruptly with vague references to safekeeping. The silence surrounding these hidden copies feels intentional, as though secrets were passed quietly between trusted scholars. And if those copies endured, they might still lie buried or misfiled, locked away beyond the reach of modern researchers. Callimachus compiled a monumental catalog that once mapped the entire intellectual landscape of Alexandria's holdings. Known as the Pinnaces, it listed authors, subjects, and volumes in exhaustive detail. Yet only fragments survive, tantalizing pieces of a guide that could reveal precisely what was lost. The surviving scraps contain titles of works so obscure, intriguing, or strange that their absence becomes haunting. They hint at countless manuscripts we can name but will never read. The disappearance of the Pinnaces itself compounds the mystery, removing the one tool that could confirm whether rumored transfers or hidden caches ever existed. Without this index, the library's contents remain a ghostly silhouette, visible enough to provoke imagination, but never clear enough to solve the puzzle. Over time, some historians have suggested that the library's scrolls were far too numerous to remain confined to its central buildings. They propose that large quantities may have been relocated to state warehouses positioned throughout the city, structures designed to store surplus papyrus and government documents. Archaeological surveys have uncovered vast, unexplained subterranean rooms beneath Alexandria that match descriptions of ancient storage facilities. If scrolls were housed there, they could have escaped the fires and riots that consumed more visible structures. Yet no definitive artifact has surfaced to confirm this theory, leaving only the unsettling notion that hidden repositories once existed. These underground spaces, if ever fully explored, might hold remnants of the library, waiting in the quiet earth for rediscovery. During periods of political instability, Alexandria's intellectual community faced growing threats from rival factions, invading forces, and religious upheaval. Some scholars, aware of the danger, may have orchestrated quiet operations to evacuate vulnerable texts. Their motivations were not only academic but deeply personal, driven by fear that centuries of accumulated wisdom could vanish in a single violent moment. These rescue efforts would have required secrecy, cooperation, and trusted networks extending beyond the city's walls. If such operations occurred, the rescued scrolls might have traveled across Egypt or into neighboring lands, preserved by individuals whose names never entered recorded history. Their silence leaves behind only speculation and the lingering possibility that entire collections once carried by desperate hands still lie hidden. The Nile served as Alexandria's lifeline, offering a swift and discreet means to transport goods across great distances. If scrolls were ever evacuated in large numbers, the river would have provided the safest escape route, moving manuscripts far from urban chaos. Boats traveling south toward more stable regions could have carried chests of papyri to temples, estates, or archives beyond the reach of war. Yet no shipment records survive, no manifests, no cargo reports, nothing to reveal whether such transfers occurred. The absence of documentation feels deliberate, as if the secrecy of these movements was essential to their success. This silence deepens the possibility that scrolls traveled the Nile under guarded circumstances, vanishing into new homes that never re-entered historical memory. All efforts to trace the library's missing scrolls falter at the same point. None can identify a final location. Each theory explains how scrolls could have survived, but none offer evidence of where they ultimately rested. Warehouses, convents, private homes, or distant sanctuaries remain only shadows in speculation. This persistent lack of closure suggests a deeper truth, that the disappearance of the scrolls was not a single event, but a gradual scattering over centuries, each loss compounding the mystery. But the absence of answers also preserves hope. If no theory can close the case, then none can disprove the survival of hidden caches. The trail may be faint, but it is not extinguished, leaving the mystery unresolved and alive. Across the deserts of Egypt, secluded monasteries guard collections of manuscripts that have remained untouched for centuries, preserved by monks who value silence over disclosure. Some of these ancient libraries are rumored to contain locked rooms sealed generations ago, their contents known only to a handful of caretakers. Travelers speak of shelves crowded with fragile volumes whose origins no one can trace, hinting at knowledge carried into isolation during Alexandria's turbulent years. Scholars allowed inside describe reading rooms lit by narrow shafts of sunlight, yet they admit many doors remain closed. If any surviving Alexandrian scrolls endure, these quiet sanctuaries offer the most plausible hiding places, waiting patiently for the world to realize what treasures might lie behind their guarded walls, to be revealed someday. Within the vast maze of the Vatican's archival corridors, Miles of shelves stretch into heavily restricted chambers where only select scholars are granted entry. These archives hold documents collected over centuries, many of which remain uncatalogued or misunderstood, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic obscurity. Rumors persist that fragments of ancient Greek manuscripts sit misfiled among diplomatic correspondences and theological treatises, their true origins forgotten. The sheer scale of the collection makes verification nearly impossible, but the possibility lingers that scrolls rescued from Alexandria found their way into Rome's hands and eventually into this labyrinth. If even a single Alexandrian text lies hidden here, it would mean the library's legacy survived in secret, protected yet inaccessible, waiting for a moment when its rediscovery becomes unavoidable. Far from the Mediterranean, the desert city of Timbuktu once flourished as a vibrant intellectual center, home to scholars who treasured written knowledge as deeply as any Alexandrian scribe. Its ancient libraries contain manuscripts referencing Greek works that no longer exist, suggesting their authors drew upon sources carried south through trade routes or scholarly migrations. The possibility that fragments of Alexandrian learning blended into West African traditions challenges traditional assumptions about the direction of knowledge. If scrolls or copied texts traveled this far, their journey would redefine the map of intellectual exchange in antiquity. Hidden among Timbuktu's dusty volumes may be echoes of lost histories, preserved unexpectedly in a place few would associate with the vanished collection of Alexandria. Archaeologists and papyrologists continue uncovering ancient texts in unlikely locations. Carbonized scrolls sealed by volcanic ash, papyrus dumps outside forgotten villages, and manuscripts repurposed in mummy wrappings. Each discovery raises unsettling questions about what else might still be hidden. Some finds contain writing styles or philosophical arguments reminiscent of works long thought lost, fueling speculation that more significant treasures remain concealed in unexplored corners. These unexpected survivals undermine the belief that the library's disappearance was absolute. If overlooked scrolls surface in random excavations, how many others lie waiting in undiscovered caches? Every new find becomes a quiet reminder that history has not surrendered all its secrets, and that the last remnants of Alexandria's vast legacy may still be silently enduring. Advances in imaging technology now allow scholars to read texts once considered permanently unreadable. Hyperspectral cameras detect ink invisible to the naked eye, revealing layers of writing hidden within damaged or overwritten manuscripts. Artificial intelligence assists in reconstructing missing words, analyzing patterns, and identifying authorship with unprecedented accuracy. This technological renaissance offers a strange possibility. Alexandria's lost works may reappear not through true physical discovery, but through the decoding of papyri already stored in museums. Scrolls dismissed as unremarkable could contain buried texts that once lined the library's shelves. Each breakthrough brings us closer to resurrecting knowledge that vanished 2,000 years ago, blurring the line between ancient history and modern innovation in ways the original custodians of the library could never have imagined. The charred scrolls of Herculaneum, carbonized by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, remained unreadable for centuries until modern technology exposed their hidden ink. Their decipherment proves that ancient texts can survive even catastrophic destruction, preserved in forms that seem beyond salvation. This precedent casts a long shadow over the mystery of Alexandria. If scrolls thought lost forever can be recovered from volcanic ruins, then manuscripts buried in deserts, sealed in walls, or stored in collapsed structures might still exist. The Herculaneum discovery suggests the library's remnants may not be gone, but merely concealed in ways we have yet to understand. It transforms the narrative from one of irreversible loss into a waiting game where patience and new tools could unlock unimaginable treasures. Scientists have begun analyzing the DNA of ancient papyri, identifying the plants used to create them and pinpointing their geographic origins. This technique allows researchers to track where manuscripts were produced, copied, or transported. Imagine discovering a papyrus in a European collection whose vegetal signature matches the Nile Delta during Alexandria's intellectual peak. Such evidence would disrupt established assumptions and create a direct thread connecting modern holdings to the ancient library. DNA analysis opens the door to rediscoveries that require no excavation, only the reevaluation of artifacts already in our possession. The method transforms each surviving papyrus into a potential witness capable of revealing hidden migrations and silent journeys across continents and centuries. Modern ground penetrating radar and satellite imaging have revealed vast networks of buried chambers beneath today's Alexandria, voids that align with ancient descriptions of warehouses, tunnels, and storage halls. Some lie beneath densely populated districts where excavation is impossible, leaving their contents untouched. These underground anomalies spark intense speculation. Could scrolls sealed in forgotten rooms still survive in the dryness below the city? Without excavation, no one can say. Yet the pattern of hidden spaces suggests Alexandria's intellectual world was far more expansive than surviving records imply. Each scan captures shadows of unknown structures, raising hope that one day technology will peer deeper, uncovering secrets left undisturbed since the city's decline. The possibility hangs over Alexandria like a whisper that refuses to fade. Across centuries, the destruction of Alexandria has come to represent more than the fall of a single institution. It symbolizes a moment when humanity's collective potential was fractured, when the fragile thread of accumulated wisdom snapped under the weight of conflict and neglect. People imagine what might have been: earlier breakthroughs in science, alternative philosophies, forgotten histories, and feel a quiet grief for a world that never had the chance to form. The library's loss endures not because of what we know, but because of what we suspect was possible. It stands as a reminder that knowledge is both powerful and perilous, vulnerable to the shifting tides of politics, ideology, and chance, always one disaster away from silence. Imagining a world where Alexandria's scrolls endured is like peering into an alternate timeline shaped by ideas centuries ahead of their moment. Perhaps the scientific revolution would have arrived in antiquity, guided by lost treatises on mathematics, astronomy, or early engineering. Explorers might have navigated using maps based on forgotten geographical theories, altering the boundaries of discovery. Philosophies crushed by time could have influenced the evolution of religion, law, and culture. Such possibilities haunt historians because they reveal how fragile progress truly is. If a single library could contain enough brilliance to reshape civilization, then its disappearance becomes not just a tragedy of the past, but a warning about the precariousness of human advancement. History is often imagined as a tidy sequence of recorded events, but in reality it is built from fragments, guesses, and chance survivals. The disappearance of entire libraries, archives, and personal writings shows how easily the past can be rewritten by loss alone. What we consider fact may simply be what endured, while countless competing narratives faded without a trace. The case of Alexandria exposes this uncomfortable truth with brutal clarity. If scribes, rulers, or mobs could erase so much without leaving clear evidence, what else has vanished unnoticed? How many stories, discoveries, or ideas have slipped beyond recovery, leaving us with an incomplete mirror of humanity's journey? Despite centuries of searching, the trail of Alexandria's lost scrolls never fully disappears. Unexcavated chambers remain beneath modern streets. Sealed libraries hide in remote deserts, and forgotten manuscripts continue to surface in unexpected places. Each discovery rekindles hope that some fragment of the library may still survive, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered. The mystery endures because it is larger than any single solution. It sits at the crossroads of myth, history, and longing. Until the day the final answer emerges, Alexandria remains a story still unfolding, a puzzle that invites every generation to look again at the shadows of the past and wonder what secrets time has not yet surrendered